It began with a bird and an oak tree. The women of Plataea would go to the edge of a sacred oak grove and scatter food on the ground. Then they would wait. Whichever tree the bird landed on first, that tree would become the bride. It would be carved into a human figure, dressed in the robes of a woman, veiled, and placed in a cart. A procession would form, music would begin, and the entire community would escort their oak bride up the slopes of Mount Kithairon to be joined in fire with the sky. This was the Daidala, one of the oldest festivals in the Greek world, practiced at Plataea in Boeotia in central Greece for centuries, and recorded in detail by the traveler and geographer Pausanias in the 2nd century CE. It was a sacred marriage festival, not a mystery, not a secret ceremony for initiates only, a public ritual held in the open air, participated in by every person in the region. The sacred marriage of Zeus and Hera, enacted by an entire community together. To understand what the Daidala meant, you have to understand what Zeus and Hera meant, not as the figures they became in later mythology, but as living cosmological forces. Zeus was the sky, the thunder, the rain, the fertilizing power that descended from above. Hera was the earth, or more precisely, the great goddess of the Argive tradition whose sacred marriage to the sky was understood as the event that ordered the world.
Their union was not a story about two deities. It was the explanation of how everything worked.
Sky meeting earth, the masculine and feminine principles in balance, each requiring the other, neither complete alone. When their marriage held, the world was fertile, ordered, and alive. That was not metaphor. For the people who practiced this, it was the structure of reality.
The Daidala existed in two forms. The lesser Daidala was held every several years by Plataea alone. The oak bride chosen, dressed, and processed to the mountain. The greater Daidala was held every 60 years, and when it came, it drew every city of Boeotia together. 14 oak figures, one from each participating city, were dressed and veiled and placed in carts. 14 processions became one. The whole of Boeotia moved together up the slopes of Mount Kithairon, converging on a great altar of wood and earth built at the summit. The myth behind the festival is worth knowing. Hera had quarreled with Zeus and withdrawn from him, retreating to Euboea, an island of the coast of Greece, withholding herself, the sacred marriage broken. Zeus, advised by the mortal king Kithairon, devised a plan. He carved a wooden figure, dressed it as a bride, and spread the rumor that he was taking a new wife. Hera came down from Euboea in fury, tore the veil from the figure, and found only oak. Recognizing the trick, she laughed, and in her laughter, the quarrel dissolved and the marriage was restored. The Daidala reenacted that restoration every time it was held. Not the wedding itself, but the reconciliation, the return of the goddess, the marriage renewed. On the day of the greater Daidala, the procession ascended the mountain with the 14 oak brides, with cattle and animal offerings, with the music and the crowd. At the summit, everything was placed on the great altar: the wooden figures, the offerings, the cart, the robes, and it was set alight. Pausanias described the fire as visible from an enormous distance, a column of flame on the top of the mountain, consuming everything, the smoke rising into the sky. The sacred marriage completed, the world renewed, the community descending together into another cycle. At almost exactly the same time in the Greek world, the Eleusinian mysteries were holding the sacred marriage in its opposite form. Secret, interior, available only to initiates, the inner ceremony at the heart of the rites, never spoken of outside the sanctuary walls. The Greek world held both simultaneously, the most public possible enactment and the most private, the open fire on the mountaintop and the hidden ceremony in the darkness of the telesterion. Together, they formed a complete spiritual architecture. The sacred marriage as cosmic truth was available to everyone, in every register of human experience, from the communal procession to the deepest personal initiation. What the Daidala gave to the people who practiced it goes beyond theology. Consider what it meant to live inside a world where the highest spiritual truth was also a shared physical act. You did not receive the sacred marriage as doctrine. You walked in the procession. You watched the oak bride dressed and veiled by the women of your community. You climbed the mountain with your neighbors, every city, every household, every generation present together. You watched the fire take everything and rise into the sky. And you descended the mountain in the company of everyone you knew. Inside a story you all inhabited equally. This is what shared cosmology does for a community that modern life has almost entirely lost. When everyone enacts the same truth together, the world becomes legible. There is no gap between what you believe privately and what your society practices publicly. The order of the cosmos, sky and earth, masculine and feminine in sacred balance, is not an idea you hold in your head. It is something you have walked toward, witnessed, and carried home in your body. The psychological steadiness this produces is profound. Anxiety about the nature of reality is a luxury of disconnection. For the people on that mountain, reality had a shape, and they had just reenacted it together. There is something else worth sitting with. The feminine was not peripheral to this cosmology. Hera was not subordinate to Zeus. She was his necessary counterpart, the one whose withdrawal broke the world and whose return restored it. The festival existed because of her. The 14 oak figures were her image. The reconciliation was her laughter. Without her, there was no sacred marriage, no fertility, no order. The community that climbed Mount Kithairon together was climbing toward a world in which the feminine principle was not optional. It was the condition of everything working. The greater Daidala was last recorded in the 2nd century CE. Within 2 centuries, Theodosius would close the sanctuaries. The oak groves would be left to grow untended. The mountain would hold no more fires. But for as long as it lasted, Boeotia had this, a festival that asked the whole of a people to stop, to dress a tree in a bride's robes, to walk together up a mountain, and to enact, in fire and procession and communal witness, the truth on which their world was built.